Hello everyone, my name is Laurel and I'm a first year undergrad clarinetist. I thought I'd show you guys how to make hot cross buns today. If you haven't done much baking before, it's not as hard as you think, so maybe give it a go and I'm sure your family will be quite pleased about it. I chose this just because Easter's coming up, and for me I find baking really therapeutic and I hope you will too. Right, I'm going to start by measuring out all of the ingredients. Not quite enough. We've got 150 grams, or for me 5 ounces because I'm using quite an old set of scales. And the mixed peel, here we go. I've tried to make mixed peel once before, but it went a bit crap. You have to do a lot of work for what is very little, though I understand why people do it. So 3 ounces of this, or 80 grams if you've got proper fancy scales. Chopped apple. So you only use 1 apple, but because these are quite small, and once I've cored it and peeled it, most of it will have gone away. Unfortunately, I've forgotten to buy some oranges, so the recipe is slightly wrong, but if you have any oranges, I would definitely put them in, because the zest just makes it really light and delicious. But what I'm going to do is add a tiny bit of lemon juice into the fruit mix, just because I'm preparing the fruit before I make the buns themselves. And if you don't put anything acidic with apple, it will start to go brown and sometimes a bit soft. So that will just sort of keep it together. There we go. And you just chop it up into quarters, like that. This is just how we do it. So chop it in half, just like that. So it's already a half, chopped in half again. Take out the core like that, chop it in half, and into bits like that. Sometimes I make them a tiny bit smaller, but I'd say that's just the right amount. I'll just put the milk into a heavy bottom pan, that's it. So that's 300 millilitres, and we want it to boil. And once it's boiled, we take it straight off the heat and let it cool until it's about hand temperature. There we go. We're going to measure out the flour and the butter. Right. Keep checking on your milk because you don't really want it to boil over and have to clean the whole stove top. And I'm just cutting it down like that. And then into long ways, and just into little cubes, just like that. So now we've got 75 grams, so not much sugar, but I need 2.5 ounces. So that we put into the flour. So let's check on the milk. This is the milk at the minute. Still quite warm, as you can see it's steaming, so we'll leave it for a bit longer, because if we put the yeast in it now it will kill it, and then we won't be able to make hot cross buns very well because the yeast won't be able to work properly. So we'll just leave it for a little bit in a cool place. So while we do that, we can just stir together the sugar into this mix. Measure out the mixed spice. I think it tastes really Eastery personally, but you can just use cinnamon or cloves if that's what you've got to hand, which is 2 teaspoons. And we're going to whisk it up. It's 1 teaspoon. The milk is now lukewarm and I've just opened the yeast, and we'll just put that in just so it can hopefully get started. I've only left the yeast for a minute or so, but it's starting to smell quite yeasty. I'm going to start putting in the egg that we whisked. Here we go. Whisk that in. And then I'm going to start by putting, very slowly adding in the milk as well. Some people have mixers at home. I've never had a mixer, unfortunately. But I imagine just a slow mix for this one, just so you incorporate it. Keep mixing it. And if it seems like quite a wet dough to begin with, that's better, because a wet dough, you can always add more flour to it if you need to, but generally, if you start with a wet sticky dough that's quite hard to work with, you'll come up with a lighter result, which is a bit annoying, because it would be nicer to have a dough that is just wonderful to work with from the very beginning. But the more sticky it is now, as you can see, it looks almost like batter. It means that it should be lighter at the end. There we go. What we'll do is flour the work surface, only very, very lightly, because the more flour you add to the work surface, the dough is just going to suck it up, basically, and mean that it will get easier to knead, but then again it will start to, there we go. I'm just putting most of it over there so then I can just bring it in when I need it. There we go. But if you add too much flour in to begin with, it will go really hard, and when you put it in the oven, it will turn out like a rock instead of nice fluffy dough. So there we go. We're just going to add the Sultanas mixture, this one, here we go. We've got it all ready and prepared. Oh yeah. And now we're going to turn it out onto the work surface. Lots of people I know don't like this process of kneading because your hands get all sticky and horrible. But personally, I've always really, really loved it, and this is the most therapeutic part for me. Is although it's quite gross to begin with, so I'll add a bit more flour. Although it's quite gross to begin with, it's very satisfying when it all comes together in the end. So because it's so wet, all we've got to do is do that. You just have to do the action of kneading. I'm going to add quite a bit more flour in, but not too much, because if you keep adding more, as I said, it'll be harder to do. There we go. So you just have to keep mixing it like that. Lots of bakers bring it towards them underneath it, so you're scraping off the bottom and bringing it over. So it means you're just running along the work surface and bringing it up. So can you see it's already starting to get stretchy, just like that. So if you bring your hands as if they're scrapers towards you, can you see it's all clean, and then bring it forward. That's it. Just like that. So you'll bring it together. Don't worry that it's all stuck to your hands, because soon it won't be. It will start coming together, and then you can just scrape the last bit off your hands. And if you have a scraper, that's also useful. I may go and get mine in a second. Now I might add a tiny bit more flour because it seems to be staying the same consistency. If you keep kneading it and it doesn't change consistency like this, I would maybe add a bit more flour. I say my scraper, it's a dead spatula that we have, or a fish slice, sorry, and we're just going to scrape it off. And I do the same for when I temper chocolate, is you just use the sharp long edge. You can use just a really flat edge knife or a bread scraper as well. There we go. And I'll just scrape that off my hands as well. Can you see that? It's starting to stretch out, just like that. Now that is what we're looking for. Is it starting to look less and less like a cake mixture and more like a dough. There we go. So now I'm going to use this to just scrape it up so it sticks less. So I'm just adding a tiniest bit of oil as well. Here we go. And I've got wet hands. Sometimes if you wet in your hands, look, it makes it a bit easier as well. But basically that's all the oil is doing as well. Now I've just washed it. So what we're going to do is just put a bit of oil. The only reason we're doing this is as it rises, especially it being sticky, it means that when we scrape it off later, it can just come straight off. And we won't waste any of the mixture that we've just created. So now what we're going to do, scrape it all together. That's it. And even just from sitting there for a minute, it will have combined a bit more as well. Because the more you leave it, the more combined it will get. There we go. Plonk that in there. There we go. That's just in there. And what I'm going to do now, so I'm just going to put it in somewhere warm. I use our airing cupboard. Right, so I've just taken this out of the airing cupboard and it's doubled in size, thankfully. It actually took 2 hours instead of 1, just because I didn't have the heating on, so clever me. Here we go. It smells so yeasty and fruity, that's what we are looking for. So now, it should just come out because we put oil on it, so it should make it a lot easier to turn it out. And we're just going to plop it on to there. And it's fine that it looks like you've just squashed out all the air that you've just put into it, because that's exactly what we want. You're just squishing it out, and it's called knocking back the dough, because you need to knock out most of the air that you've just put into it so that you can rebuild it up for the next time. And what we're going to do is roll it all together into a log shape so that we can cut it into 12 equal pieces to make 12 hot cross buns. So we'll just roll that up. So now we've got it to this stage, we have to chop it up into the 12 pieces. I'm just going to check again. In Bake Off they normally measure them all out and weigh them to make sure they're equal sizes, but I don't have a very precise scales for that, or can be bothered, so that's fine. Right, what we do is we'll just put a tiny bit of flour on here, and then what you do, if you just wet your hands all floury as well, is you just clasp it round like that, and you put a tiny bit of pressure down, sort of in this part of your hand, and you roll it round. So you can see it with my fingers if you do that, but you have to claw it like that, so that when you move it, it gently goes round into a circle. It will start getting stickier, but it means that as you do it, it should roll into a ball perfectly. It takes some time, but again it means that it all is together instead of quite separate. Now you've put your hot cross buns ready to prove for the last time, we're just going to turn on the oven to 220 degrees. It's just flour and water, so it's really simple to make. Just mix it in a little bit, so just do a little bit at a time. And we want it to be quite thick so that we can pour it on using a piping bag. So at the minute I'd say that that is perfect, because it's still quite thin. but will very easily come out of a piping bag. Now I'm going to show you how to make a greaseproof paper piping bag, because most of the time I always see on recipes that they say to have a piping bag, and I'm like, I don't know how to use them or where to get them or anything. So I find it a lot easier to just do greaseproof paper. So you have your square of greaseproof paper, doesn't really have to be terribly precise. Just fold it over so you have triangle. Fold it over again, double triangle, and then fold it over again. There you go. And then I sometimes fold it over again, just depending on how much that I've got. I think I might do that this time. So we just do that. So you end up with a sort of piping bag shape. Now what I do is, you don't have to do this, but normally I staple along the edge to keep it together while I pipe, because sometimes it might just go out the edge. So basically you've got that, but you need to use one of the internal pockets that you've made. It doesn't matter which one you go for. It could be that one, this one, doesn't matter. But as long as it isn't that one, because obviously it will just go all around the side. So I've just got it out of the airing cupboard, and they've completely filled out, and that's exactly what we want, all touching together. We've got to pipe the white cross on it, and we just pour it in like that. There we go. Right, so now we've filled this up, we just need to cut a tiny bit off the end and see how much that takes off. I think we might need a tiny bit more, just so it's a slightly bigger one. Right, now this is the tricky bit. If you pinch the end of it and the top bit, we can try and make sure that none of it escapes. Now if you start from this end, you just have to squeeze it very gently and let it run over the top, just like that. And then you pinch the end again, and we have to keep going along there, just over the top, like that. And you very gently squeeze while you go over the top, but not too much. You sort of just let gravity pull it down, and do it over the middle of each one. Then you've got to go this way as well. I think these are marginally too runny, so next time I make them I'll use a tiny bit less water. There we go, just to make the cross that we need. Here we go. There we are. There we go, and that's them done. So now we've got to put them straight into the oven, and then we can start making the glaze. Right, so while they're in the oven for about 20 to 25 minutes, we'll check on them about 15 minutes in, just in case they're browning a bit. But in the meantime, if you do have jam, then all you have to do is put a little bit in a pan with a tiny bit of water and heat it up till it's just liquid, and then you can just brush it on with a little brush onto the top of the hot buns. So 10 minutes in, I'm just going to have a little check. Now, they're already starting to brown quite a lot, but I can still feel that they're really soft on the inside. So I'll leave them for another 5 minutes, and then I think I might put some foil on the top just so they don't burn. But then we've still got 10 minutes to go. Now, the hot cross buns are pretty brown on the top. This is the furthest that I would let them go, because as you can see, they will start to burn otherwise. I always pick out the tops of these if they start to do that. But I know for a fact that underneath they're still not quite cooked. So we're going to leave it in for at least another 5 minutes, but with some foil on the top. So now we'll just take it out the oven, and we just need to check the bottom of it and make sure that it's cooked all the way through. And normally I lift a tiny bit up off the side to see. I might even break this one off because sometimes it's hard to lift up on its own. Here we go. Be aware as well that when you take something straight out of the oven, it's still very, very hot on the inside. And so when you leave it to cool, it will still continue cooking. Here we are. Now, it looks very brown on the bottom, but I just need to tap it and listen to hear whether it's hollow. Now that, although it's very hot, I can hear is hollow. And you only need to do it with one, because the rest will pretty much be the same. So now if you take this out and put it on a cooling rack, unfortunately my cooling rack is still at college, but I've somehow managed to find a makeshift one. It doesn't matter too much if it's just on a work surface or on a plate, but it's nice to have some air under it because then it lets it cool quicker. If you have it on the tray though, it will continue cooking because of the residual heat. So maybe don't, otherwise it'll end up being quite hard on the inside. So I've just got the apricot jam and it's quite warm, so it means it's just easy to spread. But this is just the glaze to go on top. But if you make sure you put the foil on about 5-10 minutes in, if it starts to look brown, then it won't go quite as dark as this. But I really, really like having fresh hot cross buns and just putting on some butter and it melting. I love that. There we are. And it makes them all shiny and nice as well. There you go, hot cross buns. I hope you've had a go at them and that yours are marginally better than mine as well. But yeah, definitely go for it. They're not as hard as you think, but they do take some time. But for me, I like having the gaps in between while they're proving, so I can play the clarinet or go for a walk or something. It sort of breaks up the day a bit, and I quite like that. Shall we cut into this one? It will still be quite warm, so it might not have cooked all the way through yet. Here we go. I've just got a sharp knife. Whoops. Cheeky little bit. There we go. See, it's still cooking, as you can see the steam rising off it, and that the inside still isn't quite cooked. But if you leave them, the heat will cook that last little bit, and it will mean that it's completely cooked. But there it is. And I think I'm going to have that with some butter. Enjoy.